you belong to the ivory tower. I say this ivory tower. Oh, the material will makes you
Tune. Big tune like that.
So you belong to the ivory tower. I say this ivory tower. Oh, the material will makes you feel superior. So then you look down with scorn at your brother. But your flying space is getting very narrow. Yeah. So you won't be able to resist the arrow.
Birds that fly high.
None of them ever touch the sky.
Birds that fly high.
Got to fly
Down to die.
So flap your wings and fly. You could never touch the sky. And don't care how high you fly. You got to fly well down.
To die. Birds that fly high. Gotta fly back down to die.
Politics and politicians is the government. Power and corruption stands behind them. They created dirty middle class society. Within that circle, them control all the money. If they could have paid their way, they'd live forever. But we all got to go 6 feet under. Birds that fly high, none of them ever touch the sky. Birds that fly high, got to fly down to die. So flap your wings and fly. You could never touch the sky. Don't care how high you fly. You got to fly back down to die. Birds that fly high, got to fly back down to die. You remind me a lot of the vultures flying in your private jets and helicopters. At the expense of the poor, you built your castle. After using us, you're giving us the hassle. You feel you are so protected up in orbit. You don't know you're just another flying target. Birds that fly high, none of them ever touch the sky. Birds that fly high,
Fly down to die.
so flap your wings and fly. You could never touch the sky. And don't care how high you fly, you got to fly right down to die. Birds that fly high, got to fly right down to die. Play your guitar for me. The big man hear the words of this small man. You only created your own damnation. You make vanity and luxury your glory. But behind that stands a very sad, sad story. What does it profit the man who owns the whole world and yet suffereth the loss of his own soul? Birds that fly high, none of them ever touch the sky. Birds that fly high, got to fly right down to die. So flap your wings and fly. You could never touch the sky. And don't care how high you fly, you got to fly right down to die. Birds that fly high, got to fly right down to die.
Brother Valentino, the people's Calypsonian, giving us in reggae style tonight. Birds that fly high can never touch Jah's sky. Brother Bob said, Jah would never give the power to a bald head. That is why I love being West Indian. When I hear the music and the wisdom, when God was sharing gifts, he gave us West Indians some special gifts. And he had to give us some gifts because of what we endured and we survived. And God kept the gifts we brought across the Middle Passage intact. And when the gates were pushed open, finally in 1838, we walked out with those gifts: the calypso, the reggae, jazz, the blues, hip-hop, bongo, salsa. We walked out of the plantation with those gifts. That's what has kept us going. When the times are rough, when it seems as though all is lost, those bards, they call them, men and women of wisdom, making sense and opening the way, showing us the way that we can see through to the other side. Birds that fly high got to come down to die. All those who are flapping their wings, they're going to be brought down to low gravy. So says the wisdom of our people. If we have character, if we have personality, it's those men and women who give our Caribbean, its personality. Those who use their voices to communicate complex reality. Some with brush in their hand, painting our reality and our aspirations. The poet, giving us 4 and 6 verses, what it takes the novelist to do in 400 pages. But the novelist writing away, writing our thoughts down on paper, writing our cries, writing our imagination down on paper, giving life, giving personality to who we are. And we are a complex people. We are as black as the midnight. Some of us. The midnight signaling the end of a day of toil and pointing to tomorrow. Today may be rough, but at midnight we look forward to peace in the valley tomorrow. We look forward to the promised land, always pushing boundaries, as CLR James has taught us, pushing boundaries and moving beyond the boundaries. Ada make Allah with there. Ada make Allah with there. Good evening to all of you, wherever you're joining us. We're big show tonight. Big show tonight, because a man of wisdom is going to be here. Nigel Hughes, our senior counselor. And with all due respect to some of you friends, he did not fly down from a tree yesterday. You all know my story go. I love you all. I love my people unconditionally, but not uncritically. I saying again, Nigel Hughes didn't fly down from a tree. Wrong talk. And you all know I don't like that, even when it comes from my friends. You see, you can't and we can't punish a brother because his father walked out to the ghetto 2 days before you, father. We all come from the ghetto. And it's not the walking out. It's when you walk out, what you do. If you walk out, turn your back and go away. And never come back. Good evening to you all. You know, I got to throw me a hint. Because that's part of our personality. That's part of our character. We like to throw hint. Birds that fly high cannot touch the sky. They got to come back down to earth to die. And we got to bring some people, the regime, at the end of the day, they got to come down back to earth. I say, let them do their do. Because after today comes tomorrow. We say in the villages, a one time, after one time, or a 2 time. There's life after the PPP. There is life after the PPP. A man come out the minibus earlier today. I was going into Critical Labor College and he said, get something for tell me. I said, he said, at times you don't know me. I said, no, me, I know you. But I know you because we're all Guyanese. And he said, I want to tell you one thing. You lapse big during the coalition time. I said, what a lapse with. He said, people like you are the ones who fight to bring the coalition into power. And when they get into power, it's people like you was the first one they kick. And he tell me that he want me to tell Aubrey and Nigel, because he noticed I'm going to get Nigel tonight. Come out the minibus. He said, I want you to tell Aubrey and Nigel that what the other one do, if they risk that, if they throw the freedom fighters out of the dance when they get power, they got meet with people like he, and he's a strapping African. So I tell you, I'm going to tell Nigel, and whenever I see Aubrey, I'm going to tell Aubrey. He said, you don't want me to tell them privately. I must tell them publicly. Good evening to you all, whether you're joining us from in Guyana, whether you're joining us from outside of Guyana, whether you're joining us from the United States where they're making history. Once again, we're being called upon to save the conscience of mankind. We're watching them with eagle eyes. Welcome to Politics 101. My brother Nigel Hughes is here tonight. And I just, oh my God, Lord, I just come back from funeral and here the exchange. We went to, well, you know, you always get repass now, especially when it's overseas thing. Here the thing. I said, well, I got to go to Oba. I got the thing. But you got to ask Nigel some hard question tonight. And Vashti, the lone lady at the table, said, they ain't got hard question for Nigel Poulin because he's an answerer. You all understand why I love you all? I love you all. Because the wisdom that cometh forth, ask Nigel some hard question tonight about some people. You know the story goes. They don't play. They don't play, you know. They don't play. Ask Nigel some hard question. And clearly one of Nigel's supporters was there. Vashti said, Nigel ain't got a hard question for Nigel Poulin. He's an answerer. He's an answerer. Good evening and welcome to Politics 101. We're ready to roll and we're ready to go tonight. Let's bring in Brother Nigel.
Brother David, good night. And as always, I start by saying thank you for the good work that you continue to do. Hard questions are no hard questions. And I like to say, without the hard questions, our people don't understand where we stand. So I'm asking for an easy passage. Ask them where they're hard.
Yeah, but you I know you're done with the Rasta thing. And so you know about the forwarder. But I bet you didn't never hear about the answerer. But that comes from my dear village of Buxton. They don't play them there. They don't play there. You also heard the man who jumped out in minibus on Wolford Avenue today.
Yep.
Give me a serious message to give you. So I want your response before we get going with the other questions. Your response to that gentleman from the minibus.
David, I am not in as elevated a category as you in the struggle before 2015. But you know that we saw a lot of things happening to the people who made the greatest sacrifices to put the coalition in government. And it was a hard call at various stages to call out our people. I know in the case, you for sure, you spoke tirelessly, wrote tirelessly about potential missteps that turned out to be missteps. In my case, I left early, but I remember when they went to Stabrook and they moved those women, you know, for 15, 20 years before them, the spear point, the head of the spear was those women who used to protest and walk down the street and block the street, or how you were going to move them from Stabroek, irrespective of the fact that it was our government. I went out there because we had to show solidarity. I think, I should say, I hope that we have learned some salutary lessons from that period. Salutary lessons. You know that a lot of our supporters felt that no attention was paid to them except when we were in difficult circumstances, which was after December the 18th, 2018. So I thank that brother from the minibus for what he has said, because essentially what he is saying, don't believe that when you get there, you can take us for granted and expect us to stay quiet because you don't want us to rock the boat. And that is a very, very strong, powerful message. And certainly in my review of the missteps during the period that we were in office, that is one of the messages. Because a lot of people felt that they kept quiet despite the fact that we didn't look at their interests. And so I thank the brother, and I will say to him and anybody else, if you see as if I'm thinking of going offline, not even going offline, thinking about going offline, please make a lot of noise. A lot of
Make a
noise.
lot of noise. Brother Lucius, you've got the answer. I know you're listening, Ted, because you said the program starting 7. You're going to buckle up from quarter to 7 because you don't want to miss not a line. Because I tell you, that's going to be the first question I'm going to be asking Nigel Hughes tonight. So you got your answer there. Nigel, it's been what, almost 4 weeks since you have
Mm,
become leader of the AFC, and there's been lots of activity. I notice you've been going around communities, talking to people, as you said you would have done. I'm interested in you sharing with us some of what you have been hearing as you've been going on those listening tours.
David, the first thing that struck me in all of these visits, irrespective of whether they were predominantly African markets or Indian markets, is that you can never, until you walk that ground, really understand what those people are living. And here, message throughout every community is they're not feeling anything from the oil money. Two, perhaps even more prominently, sales down and struggling. Sales are down and they're struggling. All this big talk with infrastructure and so, they have zero interest in it. Lenora, Perica, Vendors Arcade, business bad, money not circulate. Whether you say that in African dialect or Indian dialect, money not circulate. And this oil thing is so remote from them because they don't feel it. They don't feel it. That is a persistent message every stallholder you go to or every other stallholder. And it was particularly enlightening in Lenora and Perica. What is also enlightening in the case of Perica was that the market, actually in both in Lenora and in Perica, the market facilities that they were building to put the people in, they knew in advance it couldn't work. It was far remote. And in the case where I shared a video, the water off the roof flowing straight into the market before the people even start to occupy. So they felt that there was a level of contempt that the authorities had for them. So money not circulating, business bad. And the lady made a very interesting point. She said, look, school closed. They said because school closed, you expect the sales to go down. So I asked her, why would the sales go down because school closed? She said she don't understand that. Because the children still got to eat every day. It probably means that people are in such difficult circumstances that where the kids staying home, perhaps they are spending less than when they were sending them to school, where they had to send them to school with food and lunch kit. Because the parents, they're still doing the same jobs, but the sales have dropped since school is closed. So there's a lot of data that we gathered on all of those trips that is bad. One of them that really moved me was West Coast Babies. Went to Bel Air and the Food for the Poor area. David, the roads, if you see the roads in that community and the trenches outside of those homes are stagnant, they don't flow anywhere. They are stagnant. So the breeding ground for the mosquitoes. Unbelievable. When I tell you, you look at the trench outside of 50 houses, the water flows nowhere. So it's as if it's a pool to collect water that goes nowhere. Seriously depressed communities. And they were quick to say that, look, if you go a couple street down the road, you ain't gonna find the same thing.
Yes, yes. Nigel, I didn't know you were going into Lenora, and one of my um, very good Indian Guyanese friend called me and said, "Well, you're buying Nigel brave." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, he braver than I thought he was." I said, "What you mean, talk to me?" He said, "Doc, the man gone to Lenora in orphan yard." I said, "Uh-huh." And then I went online and I saw clips of the visit. Um, tell us. Maybe you are not the best person because you obviously you were leading the delegation and so on. But I'm interested to know the response to you. And I know you were, uh, there's a lot of humility and so on. But I would like to know what is it you felt as you went into the Indian Guyanese communities, and the response to you, was it hostile?
Well, David, let me start with what I thought I would be met with.
Oh God.
When I was when I took the decision to go into Lenora, I thought that I would be met with um, polite hostility, in the sense that people might be courteous, but clearly not at all interested in what you had to say. We got there somewhere between 6:30 and 7 in the morning because the market start early. And I could say without fear of contradiction by anybody who was there was not a single person who I interacted with, whether they were stallholder or whether they were just purchasing, they were just purchasers or people come to buy in the morning. Not a single stallholder, not a single person I came across had any hostility. They were they were open, talking about their challenges. There were some who clearly are going to be continue to be supporters for the People's Progressive Party, but even them said, well, "Boy, business ain't good, but what are you gonna do?" Which is fact. Yeah, life gotta go on. But I didn't encounter any form of hostility, and it was the most positive interaction. By the time I got to Parika on Sunday, Parika was unbelievable. Perhaps, well, it is a much bigger market. When I got to Parika, the reaction to the entire team that went there was unbelievable. Very warm, very welcoming. But more importantly, they were talking to us about the challenges they faced just on their daily lives and particularly in the business. So Lenora is about a 7 hour market on Saturday. A lot of people sell out on the road at the Lenora market. And they were sharing with us, sorry, that they wanted to move some of them off of that road to put up a car park for a private hospital that is across the street. So this is even within that community, they felt the disregard and disrespect that was coming from the people who presumably most of them had voted into office. That they were going to move them from this road to put up a car park. In the case of the other reason they gave for the market, the authorities in the market wanting to move them, was they were moving them into a market, and they would not give them a guarantee that other people wouldn't come out on the road to take the places that they had just been moved from. So they had a lot of tensions, a lot of tensions. I met a most gracious man who was a former cane cutter who spoke about within his own community where he lived, which is in Tushin, the kind of abuse of the people who lived there. He lived next door to some spray painting shop. The fumes from this spray painting shop were so bad that his 14-year-old daughter got affected. He had gone to EPA numerous occasions. There was no response from them. They didn't care. They felt that the person who clearly was operating this spray painting shop was highly connected. They could tell you who he's connected with. So even within the communities that I have never previously visited as I have now, that I'm beginning to do now, there are such examples of complete contempt by the authorities, who they perceive to be the government, who they know they have put in office, in relation to their own problems. And of course, because perhaps, and I'm not making any allegations here, perhaps because the traditional opposition probably assumed erroneously that these people were government supporters and you couldn't move them. Therefore, they perhaps never interacted. What those days taught me is that you got to go, you have to be embedded, and you have to listen, because a lot of the challenges that are in those communities you would not otherwise hear. What you might find is some people didn't want to take out photographs, which is necessary, which is clearly anticipated, because of course they didn't want to be identified or targeted for sanction. But it was a most enlightening and uplifting experience.
Nigel, Nigel Hughes here tonight, speaking to us for the first time since his election as leader of the Alliance for Change. Nigel, one of your former comrades in the AFC, who I think is now leaning to the PPP, said that one of the difficulties you would have, in fact, he didn't think that you would have very much traction because your politics in recent times has been Afrocentric. And he thought that that would be a liability for you. Of course, as an Afrocentric person, I was not amused by it, as if African people get cockabeh. If you mix with them, you're tainted. But I would like you to respond to that, because I think as insultive as it is to black people, it's something that falls within our political reflex, especially those of us in the political elite. We think that if you say I am, you mean that you don't like somebody else, and it's there as part of the political culture, I dare say. So I would like you to respond to that. That the fact that you went to Geneva and you picked up Afrocentric causes, then that would be a liability for you going forward. Speak to that, please.
David, you have answered this question repeatedly in several of your programs that I have seen, but I'm going to come back to that. You know that one of the calls that I have made recently over the last 3 to 4 years is that our discussion in Guyana has to address the issue of race. Before you would, I believe you would agree that there was a time when people couldn't even mention race in Guyana. It was too problematic a discussion. And it was after people like yourself came forward and said, look, we have to discuss this because it has been such a central part of our politics since independence. So don't be afraid to even mention the word. Having said that, when I became active again, maybe 3-4 years ago, I said, look, we can't have a discussion about race that is based on rhetoric. It has to be based on data. Let us see what the data says. Because if I jump up and say, black people don't like work, but I ain't got any data to support it, then it's a rhetorical statement. If I get up and say Indian people like to exploit or the leadership of the Indian people like to exploit, and I don't present data to support it, we only have a rhetorical discussion, which is abused out. That's not constructive. So I spent some time and put together Economy and Justice, which gathered some serious data in some key areas. We were going forward, so we were talking about oil at the time. None of the oil blocks. This entire economy is going to be dependent on oil for the next 15, 20 years. And at the time when I did the study, I said none of these oil blocks has been given to any person of African descent. That's a fact. That's not a racist statement. That's a statement of fact. So I published it. While I think it was 3 had been given to persons of other ethnicities. On the question of gold licenses, of the 6 licenses issued, only 1 was issued to a person of African descent, and 5 were issued to persons of Indian descent. That's not a racist statement. That's a question of fact. On the allocation of contracts in the construction industry, less than 18% in 2022, I think when I did it, was allocated to persons of African descent. Pharmaceuticals, of the major government contracts in the pharmaceutical industry, 100% went to Indian companies. Those are statements of fact. So we could start to have a discussion from empirical data because the government never contradicted any of the facts that I had put down there. So let's start with a discussion on the facts and say, look, we may be here today. How we got here is important to make sure that we don't continue to repeat this, but we need to start to have policies that redress this imbalance. Part of the response from the government was, look at the civil service, look at the army, look at the police. And my response to that is, you have been in government for the last 20 how many years? Who else had the power to change that? What you leave it unaddressed, you leave it there for whatever purposes, whether you want to refer to it for political purposes, but you had unadulterated power for 23, 24 years, during which time you had more than adequate opportunities to address. If you say there's an imbalance in the police force or an imbalance in the armed forces or an imbalance in the civil service, you who talking about one Guyana and everybody's supposed to participate, you had the power. What have you done with that power? When you are confronted with that economic data, why are you saying that the author of that production, which is based on unchallenged facts, is racist because he has brought it to your attention? I raised not only African issues, I raised educational apartheid. 2022, not a single indigenous person got an A at CXC. None. And in the same year, Guyana topped the Caribbean with students getting 24 A's. How could you possibly live in a society in which one set of students on the coast are getting 22 A's and none from the hinterland and riverine areas? If that is not a red light, an alarm for action, and in some communities, if that happened, there would have been a stronger reaction. You cannot not address that. And you don't address it by saying building more schools. You've been building schools forever in the indigenous community. So clearly the problem is not building schools. It is the quality of teaching in that community. And David, on Sunday, I had the privilege, both David Patterson and I, of meeting a teacher, African woman in the market. She teaches at Karasabai and has been teaching at Karasabai for the last 15 years. And this teacher was able to articulate at a level that you would be blown away. Student to teacher ratios in the kindergarten area should be 1 in 15. They have 1 in 25. The ratios at the most fundamental time in the educational process for our students is twice what it should be. She articulated, as you go closer to common entrance, you could perhaps risk going up to 1 in 20. But in those communities, it's not there. They're not spending the money on the quality of teaching. She, as a teacher in Karasabai, got to run a farm to live. How are we talking about all this available resources and you're building roads and you're building this and you're building that, and your most important asset, your human resources, you are spending not a cent in it. Look at how they did what they did with the teachers. The teachers, the most important aspect for the future of this country. All the labor figures, the International Labor Organization says we're gonna need X number of jobs in the next 5 years. Guyana cannot supply 10% of them. And worse, if we have 50% of our students dropping out of secondary school, they will not be able to qualify for skilled and semi-skilled labor. So we walking these young people now, long before they even make 18, into second-class citizenship. And you're going to say, because I race that, it's racist? We have to deal with what we have. We have to deal with what we produce. David, when we look in the mirror, if we ugly and we got filaria, we cannot pretend to be beautiful. We have to deal with what we look like. And we are not a pleasant looking people. When you look into the mirror, we are distorted, we are malformed. And it's one thing to be distorted and malformed. It's when your mind is based on the perpetuation of this distorted view of the world. You cannot change. And the society you can't expect a beautiful society to come from people who are poor in their thinking. Let me put it as decently as I can. It can't happen. And that's not a racist position. So to answer the brother, and I think I know who it is, to answer the brother, if you're saying to me that the approach to glaring figures that point to discriminatory acts, because I am of the same race as the victims of that policy, is to stay quiet, because it might be perceived as racist and therefore make me unelectable, that is not me. I'm sorry. And I've heard you say this over and over for years upon years, David. You say, not because I am Afrocentric means I am anti anybody. You have persistently said you believe in the fact that every human being is entitled to basic rights. When the coalition government got into power, and they started to hung prominent members of the People's Progressive Party and arrest them, I got called. I went. I didn't say, "Oh, I'm a black man. I can't go again. Go to represent you because of what? Because you happen to be Indian and the government is black, and I was supportive of them, or my wife is in the government." No, that is not how it operates. You operate from a position of principle, and that is, to me, the basis. So to answer the brother, if the principle says I should stand up for Indian people at the time when they're attacked, I will stand up. If, as is happening now, the clear victims of the present policies are African and indigenous, I will stand up for them. And if next week this party starts to attack the Indian people in Lenora because they were welcoming to me, I will be there. We have to have some point of principle in which we say this is what we're standing for. And that is my response to that, brother.
Thank you very much, Nigel. Thank you very much. Good evening to all of you who are joining us. Of course, we are coming up to emancipation starting this weekend. We are going to be in emancipation mode. Nigel Hughes is going to be one of the major speakers at our Emancipation Black is Beautiful concert at the Buxton Line Top on July 31st. We are making a statement. Nigel is going to be there. Aubrey is going to be there. I would be on the stage also, because we want our emancipation celebration to be a show of unity. A show of unity. No cussing down, no tearing down, no disunity. A show of unity, of course. Diversity of thought, diversity of action is what makes us such a dynamic society, such a dynamic people. But we are saying that this emancipation, we are holding hands together. So on July 31st, our Black is Beautiful concert at the Buxton Line Top. We would have Yoruba singers there, the Buxton Fusion drumming group, the Buxton Pride Steel Band, a number of other artists will be there. And we will have speakers, Nigel Hughes, Aubrey Norton, and like I said, I will be there. We have launched our Emancipation Fund, and some of you have already contributed to that fund, and we are going to share the tidings, some of it with Buxton, some of it with Belladrum, and some of it with Denhamstel. And we are also going to make our contribution to the Coffee 250 group, which holds its annual State of the African Guyanese Community. So please make your contribution to our Emancipation Fund, especially this year, since the government is seeking to um, undermine our celebrations. The brazen, nasty move of holding a big sport at Maltinos just across the road from where ACDA has held its emancipation activities for 34 years and more. And here the government comes in and is putting up a free sport. I understand they're busing people from out of town to bring them there to undermine the authentic African Guyanese um, commemoration of an African Guyanese Day. It is not that other ethnic groups don't have any business there, but this is African Guyanese Day. And this government really eyes past us. So we are saying, turn out in droves to the activities put on by the authentic African organizations in your community. And like I said, we have launched our fund, and we urge you to contribute to that fund, so that we can ensure that our organizations get the kind of support that they need for organizing. As I said, we kick off in Buxton, we kick off our events on Sunday with the church service at Christ Ambassadors Church, Sunday the 28th, and then on the 30th, Tuesday, our libation ceremony at the Buxton Emancipation Monument. Wednesday is the Black Beautiful concert, Wednesday night, and that's going to be our big event. And then Thursday, 1st of August, on Thursday, we have our Emancipation Soiree. Our Emancipation Soiree. There's going to be a one-man band there and feasting, all the conky and all the story going to be there. That's on the 1st of August. You can go to town at the Agda thing and come back to Buxton, or vice versa. We start at 1 o'clock. And then on the 4th of August, the annual EUC Kwayana Emancipation Symposium. The topic this year is African identity and resistance in the context of state-sponsored and other forms of racial discrimination. Going to be a big panel there. Some of Kimani, Dr. Kimani Nehus is going to be there. Vincent Alexander is going to be there. Eric Phillips is going to be there, and some others. We're going to roll out some of the other names as we go through the week. Later on in the month, on the 25th, we'll have a business expo that targets young people, young entrepreneurs from Buxton and other villages in the area to bring their products out and to display them and network. And we're hoping that what can come out of that is an organization of young African Guyanese entrepreneurs. And that's going to be on the 25th. And on the 31st, we will launch our essay competition and poetry competition. Essay competition, poetry competition. We are targeting children at the primary level, children at the secondary level, and then post-secondary. So three categories: poetry competition, essay competition. And so it's quite a spread of events this year in Boston, and we're asking for your support as we prepare for these events. Nigel,
David,
yes,
David,
go ahead, my brother.
can you just allow me to add one event to that calendar?
Yes,
As you know, the 1763 uprising in Berbice in Guyana preceded the Haitian Revolution and
yes,
actually was the most successful uprising. It lasted for a year. What a lot of people don't know is that after the uprising, the Dutch held an inquiry in which they interviewed several of the slaves, of the former enslaved, about their participation in the uprising. And it's the only documented record of the voices of the enslaved and what led them to participate in that uprising. Of course, some of them would have been misleading, but it is the only documented record of what the enslaved said. Everywhere else, they put down the revolution, they shot the people, they didn't hold an inquiry. And this is the only record, not in Guyana only, not in the Caribbean, but in the entire what is called the Western Hemisphere, including Brazil. It is a treasure trove, and all those records are kept in a museum in Holland. There's a lady called Professor Margarine Cars who wrote a book called Blood in the River that took all that documented work and produced the book. And for the first time, you started to get an insight of what was happening to the enslaved. So, what we have done is we have come together under the auspices of Epanagy, and we are bringing Professor Margarine Cars to Guyana in the last week of August. And she is going to be delivering a presentation at the Theatre Guild on the 30th. I urge whoever can go to go because this is the raw history. She's of Dutch ancestry, but she's a professor in Cameron University in the United States. But this is our history, and it's the only record of the voices of the former enslaved about what was happening. And I would like to encourage anybody who's interested in and when I say our history, I don't mean just African history, the history of Guyana, to go and listen to Professor Cars. Professor Cars, I dare say, is not an African woman, of course, because
right.
to get access to the records in the Dutch archives. And I hope coming out of that, there will be a movement to allow our academics not only access, but probably to have those records kept in Guyana, provided we can guarantee the sort of um, environment for their safe storage, because it's such a treasure trove. One of our historians back in the 60s, early 70s, during Mr. Burnham's era, um, Robert Moore,
Yes,
wrote about that uprising, not as extensively as Professor Cars. So I'm hoping to have his book as well published, because I met his daughter shared it with me, and it is my hope that we can share this, because this is a these guys. Forgive me for going on here. These guys spoke about a dual existence. The African former enslaved were going to run their own business in the upper part of Berbice, and they were prepared to with the Dutch colonials living close to the mouth. And Coffee proposed that. You'll think of the level of sophistication of an enslaved person talking about not only self-government, but allowing former adversaries to live in a relationship which allowed them to conduct business and run separate nations. That is that was so advanced for the time. And this is people from us. This is our heritage. And I don't when I say us, I don't mean Africans alone. This is the heritage of Guyana.
that's right.
1763. Kofi and the guys saying, look, we gonna run Upper Berbice and you guys could stay near the mouth. So, but I just wanted to mention that event at the Theatre Guild on the 30th.
And I want to endorse that event. I've heard, I've seen Professor on 2 or 3 interviews, and she she is so well versed on that subject, and she comes at it not from this disinterested
Yeah.
what we normally associate with academics, that I am objective. No, she doesn't come at it from that false, I'm disinterested and so forth. She has an interest in it because, as you said, she's of Dutch ancestry, but she teaches in the United States of America. And clearly, when she ventured out and she didn't even know where Guyana was. She hadn't
Yep.
heard of Barbies and so on, which makes her work even more interesting. So
David,
yeah,
one of the things I discovered that after the uprising, shortly after the uprising, there were those enslaved that just wanted to run their farm and live a normal life. And then there were those that wanted to carry us to the state of nationhood. Imagine talking about in 1763 in a completely white dominated world, talking about nationhood and protecting and having their own militia and having their own unbelievable stuff. This, I don't want to say dwarfs the Haitian uprising, but it indicates that in our country, we had a level of sophistication in 1763 to talk about nationhood. That was Guyana long before we even spoke about the idea of Guyana.
that's right. That's right. And they were talking about trading
Absolutely.
trading with their former oppressors. I mean, I remember as a small boy hearing somebody saying that the 1763 revolution failed. And I remember Tommy Payne, my countryman, who was on the panel. It was a wrong thing, and he said, "Oh no, fail." And I remember as a small boy, quite in my teens at that time, and being amazed at what you heard those people were able to do in the 11 months or so that they held
Yep.
Berbice. So we highly recommend that activity. I have a couple of people to thank. I have to thank Ms. Portsmouth. Thank you very much for your contribution. I would like to thank Leslyn for her contribution. I would like to thank the Aziz for their contribution. And I know some other contributions are coming in. I'll get to them before we end the show. Nigel, yes.
I will commit to contribution, but I don't want it to be a PR thing. I will send that to you.
Wonderful.
I don't want to,
Right. Thank you very much, Nigel. Nigel, there have been some questions that in people's mind, and I would like to get your take on them. First, I am telling you what I've been hearing. A lot of people who have spoken to me have said, I am for Nigel, but I'm not sure about the AFC. They were responsible for bringing down the coalition government. Frank with me, say, I for Nigel Hughes, but I'm not sure of the AFC. And they're asking me to help them work that through. And in some instances, I've offered my views and my perspective on how we can work that through. But I would like to throw that to you because I am sure you would have heard that. I'm sure you would have heard that from
Yeah.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Okay. So with any discussion, we have to agree to truth and facts. It is a fact that it was an Alliance for Change member who voted in favor of the no confidence motion. Can't get away from that. It is a fact that that person who voted for the no confidence motion, who came from the Alliance for Change, was Indian. Don't let's hide that. Let's have an open discussion on it. Good. We also have to take into account that I think it was 3 or 4 hours before the no confidence vote, when the parties caucused at the Arthur Chung Center, that same individual said he was committed to the government. He had no difficulties with the way the government was operating. And none of the leaders of the Alliance for Change, Indian, African, indigenous, Chinese, none of them recall any complaint by this gentleman about the way sugar workers were treated. Politics, I know, is a dirty game, which at least you expect some consistency of action and morality. If that person who voted in favor of the no confidence vote had a long history of complaining and acting for and on behalf of the interests of the sugar workers, you could say that the Alliance for Change, particularly, and the coalition generally, were warned of his concerns and therefore would have been given an opportunity to address them. That never happened. So clearly, this person was motivated by something other than a position of principle. He used the sugar workers as a ruse to say why he was voting for the no confidence. But having said that, the intelligence of the Alliance for Change and the intelligence of the coalition government failed because there were several other signs from that gentleman that indicated that he was going to migrate. He had closed down his practice. He had sold some of his private property, cars, etc. And therefore, in any society, you need to have some level of intelligence which would say that despite he is saying, I am with you, his conduct is pointing to something else. So I will accept that there was a failure. But this gentleman never, as far as I'm aware, because I was chairman of the party at the time, not when he voted the no confidence, but up to 2016, I don't recall him ever saying that he had a difficulty, a fundamental difficulty with the way in which the sugar workers were treated. So it means then that he went there with malintent, intending to sabotage the government. It doesn't change the fact that it was an Alliance for Change supporter. It doesn't change the fact of what his ethnicity was at the time. And it doesn't change the fact that there was a failure of intelligence, both in the part of the Alliance for Change and the broad coalition that didn't pick it up. However, going forward, we have to make sure, and of course, constitutional change, et cetera, is something that I've been advocating for a long time. But we have to make sure that we are not tricked again, because don't fool yourself to believe that there was mass discontent with the government at the time. There was, of course, there was discontent, but not mass discontent, the way in which this gentleman sought to say after he had voted and after he had fled the country. If he had a history of standing up in the National Assembly and saying, look, I am not attacking my party, but I am voicing concerns on behalf of X, Y, and Z, I would say, yes, it was so. The problem, again, and I admit our failures, is that that was never addressed in our public relations as to how why he voted the way he did. We went into a state of panic. Various lawsuits were filed, perfectly entitled to do that. But nobody said, where is the principle behind the conduct of this gentleman? He then, of course, gets rewarded with a position as High Commissioner to India. Think of what that does to the political morality of the National Assembly. You are effectively saying that it is okay to sabotage at a national level in your parliament the other side by whatever means they procured that vote, and then reward him. Think of what you then have a National Assembly in which genuine interest on behalf of people who vote for you are not debated, but you are rewarding conduct that clearly is intended to undermine the entire basis of, in this case, the sitting government. So we have to be very careful in Guyana, because just the same question you have been asked to put to me, we don't want to end up in a position where people say, well, boy, you can't trust Indian members of parliament who are in the PNC or who are in the Alliance for Change, particularly because look what Charandas did. That is a most dangerous and racist position to come. It is most unfortunate that Charandas has the characteristics he has. But if you go down that line in a country that is as fractured as Guyana, you are going to have a difficult time dealing with people who are of the opposite ethnicity in parties that had traditional voters of a particular ethnicity. And we cannot do that. Now, I can't, as Nigel Hughes, guarantee that when we win, that a particular MP who happens to be the same ethnicity as Sharon Das won't act the same way. What I know for sure is that the people who will be sitting in the National Assembly will possess sufficient moral values, commitment to development, that it makes the possibility of similar conduct significantly diminished and remote. But Chandas set a most unfortunate precedent and did horrendous damage to race relations in Guyana. And the fact that a sitting government would then reward his conduct by giving him ambassadorship to India leaves naturally in the African community real issues. I have to commend the leaders of the Alliance for Change and Mr. Granger from not allowing that to become a open war between the Alliance for Change and the APNU, because it could have gone there very, very easily. It was going there the same night. I have to commend MP Rajkumar, who was sitting next to Charandas. And when Charandas said no, he hit him violently. I said, what are you doing? And Rajkumar is Indian. So we had examples of the kind of conduct that this country needs. But it is unfortunate that the damage that was done to the relations between the African and Indian people as a result of the conduct, not only of Charandas, but of the conduct of the government by saying, look, we are going to applaud you, appoint you as ambassador to India over, I am sure they had several people in the People's Progressive Party far more deserving of such an appointment. But you do it because, A, you bring down the government. We have to be very careful of what message we send as leaders, what message we send as citizens to our citizenry, especially when it comes to the issue of race. And that was an unfortunate one. I know it perhaps does not answer your question directly, but I say, and I did say this when I was elected, that we are going to, in the Alliance for Change, review everything that we did leading up to the decision to coalesce, during the coalition government, during the no confidence vote, and afterwards, because the only way we can proceed as a mature party is to acknowledge these things that you have raised, address them, so that we find potential solutions to dealing with them in the future. The last thing I want, insofar as I'm afforded the privilege of leadership of the Alliance for Change, is to bury the fact that it was one of our members that brought down the government, bury the fact of the impact on race of that person, and bury the fact the way the government acted in relation to rewarding him. We have to confront this. You cannot run a modern, sophisticated party which has those kinds of fault lines. And I give you my commitment that at least the party will address them. We may not address them in public because we don't want people posturing for public purposes, but we will be addressing them internally.
Addressing them entirely. And I think that goes a long way, Nigel. I think I know something about political culture in Guyana, having been around for quite a while. And I think a lot of time our people on all sides of the political and ethnic divide, what they want is for us to address things, for us to answer questions, for us to pose questions. I noticed that shortly after you came to office as leader, you said that one of the things that the AFC needs to do is to apologize for our missteps and mistakes during the coalition period. And I remember when the WPA, prior to the 2020 election, suggested that to our comrades in the APNU. They said no, no way would they apologize to their own supporters. We were shocked. And we went out and apologized. But of course, our microphone is not a mega one. And it would have helped if the two larger parties had, we didn't put it to the AFC. Of course, we put it to our partners in the APNU. And so we in the WPA were quite heartened when you assumed the leadership of your party that you said we should apologize. What motivated you in that direction?
Many things, David. One of them would be, and I know this is going to sound very sort of nostalgic. One of the things that I used to do when I was still in high school was run behind the WPA. I was a crazy WPA supporter when you had Walter and Clive and Rupert and that a multi. And one of the things that the WPA has consistently stood for me, even in that memory, is political principle and political morality. And Guyana has, I think, is an infinitely more fractured society now. It's in a much more dangerous position. And hubris is perhaps one of the most dangerous conditions you have to guard against. Hubris, you cannot assume that you are right. And you cannot assume that you never made a mistake, because if you start on that premise, you are going to stumble early. And I have been mulling over for years what it is that we should have done differently. And we have to start off. I saw that. I mean, I remember, and this is just one incident. The day after the agreement, the Herdmanson Accord was signed, not Herdmanson, sorry, the Cummingsburg Accord. The understanding was that Moses was going to become the Minister of Agriculture to deal with the Indian support base of the Alliance for Change. And Kemraj was going to be Minister of Home Affairs to deal with the security concerns of the Indian people. I remember when the decision was, I went to the people of Adelphi, Indian area of Berbice, to sell it because we knew our Indian supporters would have grave reservations about us joining with the PNC. I'm saying it as broadly and as brutally as it is. Huge. As a matter of fact, internally in the party, we had heated arguments about whether this is what should happen and whether we should wait. And I remember going to Adelphi immediately after that. I think we signed it on a Saturday. The Sunday I went to Adelphi. Moses was supposed to go, but I went and I said to the Indian supporters, cane cutters and stuff, look, I know that you got reservations, but I come to tell you that Moses gonna do agriculture, which is key to you, and Kemraj is going to be prime minister and in charge of home affairs, security, to address them. And when Moses was either not appointed, I don't know the dynamics behind that, but when Moses was not appointed Minister of Agriculture, I said internally to the party, guys, we gotta have some issues here. We gotta address this, because we cannot represent to that core support group that this is what we're going to do, and we didn't do it. And so what the AFC brought at that time was a freshness, an ability to understand, to confront difficult issues. And we didn't go back and say to our supporters across the board, Black, Indian, Indigenous, thank you for having voted for us. That's the first, to me, that's the first line of decency. If you put me in a position where I have the ability to influence the development of your life, I need to at least acknowledge that and say, hey, thank you. I'm going to try my best. If in trying my best I falter, at least I said thank you. And that is one of the things we are going to be discussing in the AFC, is the fact that we appeared perhaps not to have said thank you. I do want to make this point, and I make it for all patriotic Guyanese. When you have the same party in power for 20 plus years, and the opposition doesn't have an opportunity to govern, when they take office, especially after a 20-year hiatus, in a society that is as rudimentary as Guyana, there's going to be a period in which, I call it a period of adjustment, but it's going to be a period in which everybody coming in is green, because they never were there. And to run a sophisticated society, you need to be able to manage government. at some stage and you had no exposure to it. And then on top of that, where you have a divided society along the basis of race like us, you got all sorts of demands, claims, some genuine, some not genuine, people coming to tell you, look, so, taking the contract and getting it to your auntie, and is he Indian or he's an African, and there's a lot of stuff you have to manage. And unless you have the apparatus already in place, you're going to have difficulty. I want to commend the government of Keir Starmer. Forget the size of the victory. They had plans for what they were going to do from day one in office because they understood that when you get in there, you got to land on your feet. You don't have any honeymoon period. And so one of the things that we are working on, whether we work on them independently as a party, or if the polls suggest that we should go together in a coalition, is that we have to have a team, a separate team that does nothing else but work on what it is you're going to do when you get into government. Political parties have to have the intellectuals somewhere to do the planning and come up with the ideas. They're separate. They're not running looking for votes and PR and popularity. You also need to have a team that's beginning to identify the people, the transition, and the policies that you need to implement from the time you are sworn in and your ministers take office. You have to demonstrate that. And Keir Starmer, the Labour Party in England, have done that. They've landed on their feet running by anybody's assessment. And that is what a modern government will demand.
Nigel, yesterday I was at Giftland trying to get my phone straightened out. And I was standing there, and a brother came up to me and he said, Doc, are we going as a coalition or not? I said, why you ask? He said, well, I hear you saying that you for coalition, but I'm not getting the same kind of signals from the PNC and the AFC. And I said, what signals are you getting? He said, mixed signals. And so I told him, I think we're going as a coalition. He said, can I take it to the bank? I said, you can wait a little bit before you take it to the bank. Don't take it right away. And he walked away. And a young girl, she couldn't be more than 18, 19. She was standing waiting to do something with her phone too. And she said, sir, I don't mean to be nosy, but I have the same thing with the gentleman. I said, what do you mean? And she said, well, I hear Nigel Hughes said that they got to build up their party. And I hear Aubrey Norton say that party said that he must be the presidential candidate. And I'm confused. And she's doing her hands like this, as the young people. She said, I'm confused. I said, you are a coalition supporter? She said, yes, I'm not for any one of the party. I for the coalition, but I am confused. And at that time, I said, no. This is an 18, 19, 20-year-old, clearly the first time she's going to vote, and very excited. But what struck me is she said, I am not for any of the party, I'm for the coalition. And that thing hit me like a thunderbolt, because even though you're political and thing, sometimes when you hear these things, it hit you. And so are there mixed signals coming from the AFC? And if so, can you unmix those signals here tonight, especially for that young lady, that young girl who's excited to vote for a coalition for the first time?
Okay, so David, politics, like any other discipline, is a science. It's a science, and a big part of the science is what polls tell you. The Alliance for Change, after the 2020 defeat, suffered perhaps more than the People's National Congress, APNU, an attrition of its membership. As a matter of fact, it started to suffer an attrition of its membership from the time it went into a coalition and during the time it was in office, when it appeared to people that the Alliance for Change was not influencing the government or was not doing what people put them in there to do, which is to restrain the excesses of our coalition partner. We suffered a huge attrition of membership, massive, to the extent that people, one of our leaders said we were dead meat. Um, People refer to us dead meat. People said up to now the vice president is talking about the party being dead. I've never seen so many pathologists spend so much time on a carcass like the vice president. I mean, he make Nihal Singh look like nothing because he could only be operating on a carcass. But fun aside, so naturally, if a party has lost and is hemorrhaging the way the Alliance for Change hemorrhaged during and after 2020, it has to, first of all, stop the bleeding. Then it has to heal, and it has to come back as a formidable force. There are several examples in the world. The Labour Party in Britain, you will remember under Jeremy Corbyn, they were decimated at the polls, as political parties are, depending on the candidates they have. They took the time. Mr. Corbyn was removed. Mr. Corbyn won his seat, by the way, but he was removed. And Keir Starmer started to rebuild that party, a bit like what what's his name, Tony Blair did back in the day when the Labour Party had unelectable leaders. So when I took over, I one of the things for me as a leadership is we got to stop the bleeding. We are attempting to do that now. We have to heal, and we have to make sure that we are strong as a party. Having said that, Guyana is our prime objective. What is best for Guyana? And therefore, we are going to be conducting a series of polls on a regular basis that tell us what is the best route to removing the People's Progressive Party in its present form. The People's Progressive Party is the oldest party in this country. You can't remove it. But clearly, those responsible for the leadership and the policies of the People's Progressive Party are not in the best interest of Guyana. And therefore, we have to be guided scientifically. How are we going to do that? And just as how you run into that young lady at Giffland, we have every single day members of all races are saying to us, y'all don't go into no coalition. The reason I left y'all and didn't vote for y'all is because you're going to the coalition and do X, Y, and Z. So there's a strong pull on the other way. Mm-hmm. There are people saying, hey, we ain't going to vote for you if you go back in the coalition. And we have to analyze that. Is it the Indian people that are saying that? Is it the African people? Is it the bourgeois? Is it the middle class? We have to see how that is broken up. And all I am saying is we have to be very sophisticated in, first of all, gathering the data, analyzing that data, and when the time comes, we will make that decision. We have not taken a position that we will never. But what we're saying is we got to get our feedback because several things. If you came to me now as APNU and said, but hey, how many votes you think the Alliance for Change can get? Some people say you might even get a seat. Yeah, maybe so. In 6 months, maybe a totally different position. The polls may be saying something else. And so I say to people, whatever is in the best interest of Guyana, we will do that. I can't tell you what it is, and I'm sorry that lady will remain in a position of some confusion, but I hope that if she understands my approach and the methodology of the Alliance for Change, that she would appreciate that whatever route we take, it is better than what the PPP remaining in office.
I have a question here. Mr. David, please ask Mr. Nigel why he did not support the 5,000 for every household. Why the SP did not support the 5,000, huh?
No, I said this in your program before. I know I said it to you.
Yes, I know.
And I can explain what happened.
Yes, please do.
Okay. When the cash grant, I don't want to get into an argument about the amounts, but it was the 5,000 for every house. So when that was announced at the Buxton proposal, which you hosted and Professor Thomas was there, I had an instinctive, some would probably say, middle class reaction, if you can put it that way, which is when you start giving people money freely, there will be a huge disincentive to work. And therefore, our productive part of the economy was going to be adversely impacted. That was my position. And I thought that, giving out this free money is going to be adverse to our culture because we're going to develop feelings of entitlement, etc. And we got to be careful about it. But thanks to the People's Progressive Party and the way in which they have distributed in their biased manner the monies and the proceeds from oil, whether it is by flood relief only going to their supporters, whether it's cash grants only going to their supporters, the complete way in which there has been such a political manipulation, a biased political manipulation of the distribution of the oil proceeds, where only some communities benefit and not others, has brought me to the position that the only way we can begin to see anything looking like equity in the distribution of some of those proceeds by way of direct transfer is to pass a law that says X percentage of the GDP every year must be given to every citizen, and make sure that we have solid bases for identifying those citizens. Another reason why I've come to this conclusion is after I've started to do all these walkabouts in these communities, everybody's saying money is circulating. It's in there. They're feeling it. And clearly the only people who feel in this wealth are the contractors. And so the only way you can get that money into the pockets of the citizenry, so they then have disposable income to do what they do, is by direct transfers. And $1 million a year for every citizen we can afford. It's gonna be $250 every quarter. We can pay it quarterly, which is what I would advocate. But if you got a household of 5, they then get $5 million a year, which they can put in an investment. And I remember Professor Thomas making this statement when he made this proposal. He said, why you assume people can't be responsible in the way they spend the money? We mustn't pretend to be parents for Guyanese. Guyanese are one of the most resourceful people. Look, we get through the foreign currency crisis, all kinds of crises. And therefore, we must not assume that we have to be some sort of father figure to them. If you got 10 adults in your house, that's $10 million. You can come together and decide what business venture you're going to pursue, whether you're going to buy a home, whatever it is. But it's not for the politicians to tell you that. And so I believe you need to pass a law. The percentage for direct transfers is pegged to the GDP. It's in the statute. If it works out to $1 million a citizen, that's fine, and that's where we started. If it goes up, I see Standard & Poor's said that not Standard & Poor's, the other oil assessment group says we're up to 18 billion. I think that's conservative, but 18 billion in reserve, we're less than 1 million people. So the only way our people can feel this is not to hope that some contractor hires somebody and that they hire them, their family. No, give the money directly to the citizens and make it law. So no, I can't get into government and decide, oh, I'm going to support the people in Linden because they vote for me. No, it must be fair across the board and equitable.
Fair across the board and equitable, of course. In 2018 in Buxton, Professor Clive Thomas, on behalf of the WPA, unveiled what he called the Buxton proposal, the cash transfer, and he calculated at that time that given what he saw in terms of the amount of oil that was there, he thought that we could start with $1 million, 5,000 US dollars per household. And the thing about that proposal by Dr. Thomas and the WPA is that it's one of the ways to demonstrate a lack of ethnic bias, because each household, regardless of whether it's an African Guyanese, Amerindian, Portuguese, Indian Guyanese, each household will get the same amount of money. And as Nigeria said, it is not just walking about with a bag of money and sharing out to people. It's about statute, taking it to the National Assembly and let it be by law that at the end of the year or the end of the month or however they choose to distribute it, that each household will get the same amount of money. So it's a case of ethnic democracy, so to speak, equitability. And of course, some of us have talked about linking it to school attendance, that to qualify the next year, we're looking to see how often your children go to school, how often you take your children to the clinic. So it could have connections with the rest of
David,
the economy. Yes, Nigel.
I want you to share this figure with your readers.
Yes.
Right now, we, the country of Guyana, are making 65 million Guyana dollars an hour. In other words, we are making per day $780 million per day. Think about it. We're less than a million people, $780 million per day. We intend to double our capacity at the 2% in the next 5 years. So if we're making $780 million per day, I just want to give you the figures. We are going to be making 1.5 billion Guyana dollars per day in 2030. Direct coming to the country for doing nothing other than being Guyanese, and we found the oil. That is a horrendous amount of money. Why we can't transfer from that directly to the citizens? Who is any government to play God and say, oh, it has to be trickled down, what have you? Peg it to the GDP and give the citizens directly. Because we know for sure 1 out of 2 students is dropping out of school. Therefore, they can't qualify for skilled and semi-skilled jobs. So they ain't got no work to get the paying any real money. But at least if they get that money, they can go and invest it and build a business rather than watch the foreigners who have to come, does not may come, have to come in and take the semi-skilled and skilled jobs while they don't have an income, they ain't getting anything from there, and the prospects for employment and setting up a business are next to zero. People have to understand, right now we're making $780 million a day. There's almost $800 million a day. And that's just off of oil. We ain't going into the non-oil sector of the economy. So people have
Nigel,
to really begin to consider these figures.
yes,
And don't worry
yes,
about the
yes.
government. We're building road and we're doing this and we're doing that. You can't eat the road.
Nigel, you know, with all due respect to your middle classness and so on, I don't think you and I could have been having this conversation at this level had it not been for education.
David,
You know,
education
whether
is
you
which
come
are
from
right.
the middle class and I come from the working class, we could not have been having this kind of discussion at this level if we were not lucky enough to get what we call in Guyana an education. And so it was not surprising to me that one of the first things you zeroed on was the state of our education, and you've talked about it about 3 or 4 times here on in this conversation. The state of our education, the dropouts, um, the hinterland, for example, among the Amerindians. The story is dismal, and I refuse to believe that it is something that is essentially bad and wrong with Amerindian people, because Amerindian people in Venezuela and other countries are doing well. So it has to be something about our system in Guyana. We in the WPF said that if we have anything to do with education when we win, the first thing we'll do is declare a state of emergency.
Absolutely. Bravo.
All right, talk to
Bravo.
us. Take it from there.
No, but I want to go back and take an issue with you.
Yeah.
I don't think education was a class issue. Let me tell you why and give you the context.
Right. I wasn't saying it's a class issue.
No.
I was saying
Well,
regardless of
it was
that,
middle
because
class.
you might have come from the middle class and I
Right.
from the so-called working class, but we are here talking because of education, regardless of class. But go on.
Let's go back, because this was an African experience before it became an Indian experience, because
Yes.
the Indians came after and were bound to the estate for particular periods of time and got little or no formal education. So I'm only parking that for later discussion. But when they started to sabotage the village movement and sabotage Black entrepreneurship, all of our foreparents realized those who had to survive had to move to the urban center and to get up in life, civil service, teacher, policeman, nurse. We knew education was the only ticket out. That was a survival mechanism, David. That wasn't no middle class people deciding. What happened is that those that made it out, of course, became better off economically. And you remember villages used to pool money for somebody to go study, become lawyer in
That's
England.
right. That's
I
right.
remember my dad telling me, not for him, but for other people, the whole community would come together. One would pay for the boat ride to London. When they get up there, stories where people, a classic, Do Not Sing was my father's good friend when they were in England. And I remember Do Not telling me, Nigel, I used to walk till the sole of my shoe used to be touching the my foot bottom used to be touching the pavement in the place cold. Those are the sacrifices that were made. And every generation, irrespective of whether the African Indian, want to see the next generation better off. That's just a natural human thing. You don't want your children to go through the same thing you have gone through. So you sacrifice, and for the African population, that happened. People forget that the first some of the first hospitals in Guyana, Frank Williams, Medical Arts, combination of Black and Indian doctors, we lived this struggle. And so yes, I landed pretty comfortably, but the essential element of education was in it. The predecessor to the GPSU, which was called the British Guiana Civil Service. They went on strike because the colonialists refused to appoint my grandfather as postmaster general because he was black. The whole civil service shut down. So, and he used to, when he was in that position, he used to run little extra lessons and secretarial lessons to make it, because education was a key component. I am the beneficiary of that, and I'm forever grateful. But it's not where you land when you're born; it's what you do with your skills. And so, yes, whether you're aristocratic in origin or not is not the issue. Is what have I done, or what am I trying to do, given that privilege that I have? And so, particularly for I go to the Indian community. Back in the day, back in the 40s, the 30s, 40s, and 50s, even up to the 60s, in communities, the Indian people were regarded as less than learned. There's a fact. Black people used to look at the Indian people as, hey, buddy, y'all can't speak properly. You got this, you got your funny culture. Because to a large extent at that time, we had adopted the Anglo-Saxon culture and believed that we were better. We can't sense now, but that was how it was. And what has happened as a result of their hard work, their sacrifice, etc., they are now in a very dominant position. Again, education was key. People studied, they went away, and they performed. We have to accept all these facts and plan a pathway forward. So education has always been a key to anybody for upward elevation. I believe that the country suffered after we got rid of free education. I remember in 1976, I think it was, when Burnham brought in free education, there were people who would not otherwise get to where they are today, benefited from that, my friend. And I am speaking from a position of privilege because my father paid for me. I'm telling you, I saw partners of mine, tears almost coming to my eyes, who were it not for free education, could make it to the end of secondary school, couldn't make it to UG, now are big doctors, very successful internationally. And people don't appreciate what education does and the opportunities it affords. That's why it's got to be the number one thing that we spend. We got to develop the human capital. We can't fight it down. We can't have these people coming out of school failing and we're not even trying to impart skills that will give them an opportunity to participate. So, short answer to that is education to me is number one. All this wealth, rather than build 50 miles of road, I'd rather give 50 people universities, education, put it into the research capacity at UG, send our best and brightest to the best universities globally. Because trust me, with all that brain thrust, they will come back and design a system that will perpetuate it.
Yeah, Nigel. I do agree. Education has to be it. I'm reliably informed that a number of young people have either decided going into college that they're going to study political science. I'm told some of them have switched their majors to political science because they've been listening to this program and have been influenced in that direction. So it's not just us having the education, but as you said, is what we do with it. If we come on public spaces like this and we do the public education as I think we are doing tonight, we are also influencing younger people to understand the importance of education. And whatever we believe about Burnham, whatever, and some of us have great criticisms of Burnham, but his initiative of free education, as you said, was pivotal in producing 4 to 5 generations of skilled people in this country, people who are quote unquote educated. But like we said, it's not just the education, it's what you do with that education and whether in fact you are using it to influence others to understand the importance of education. I continue to be amazed at poor people, poor women who didn't have the chance to even finish school, but are like an eagle when it comes to educating their children. Because I experienced the same thing when I was growing up with my auntie. You know, she was a very colorful lady with your language. And she made it clear if I'm going to wear one underwear, you going to school and you taking school. All right. Of course, she didn't use say underwear. She used more colorful language. But she was clear. I get a fifth standard education and you all got to go past fifth standard. Whatever I got to do, I will do it. And I'm amazed that that thing, that drive is still there among our people. And it's up to the government and the state to take it to another level. So, yes, for us, education has to be the basis
David,
upon which our development. Go ahead, Nigel.
let me just share a little bit of history in the legal profession because it is a classic example. My father came back to Guyana as a lawyer after having gone to study in England in 1958. In those days, you had to be wealthy enough to get on a boat, go to London to get your LLB. They had no Guyana University. So it perpetuated a particular class. When he came back, the major law firms in this country were all of a particular color. They were all either white or Portuguese. He tells me of several times of experiences where he would settle a case with white and Portuguese lawyers because they had all the big contracts. They had the Bookers and the JP Santoses and the Sprostons. That's where the work came from. That he would settle a case with a Caucasian or a Portuguese lawyer in the morning and they would walk straight past you in the afternoon as if they didn't know you. The profession was completely controlled and locked off. Think of the amount of people today from the time they started University of the West Indies. They started the law school in Trinidad. Guyanese, Aubrey Fraser, started law school in Jamaica. And the numbers that came back into the profession, at a stage now, you take it for granted that the lawyers will either be black and Indian, local, dark. That wasn't so. That was a privileged position. And so we don't see the progress because we always consumed with the here and now. But unless we had University of West Indies first, and then we had University of Guyana doing the law program. I didn't go to either of those institutions, but they're fantastic institutions for what they do for development. The perspective of law used to be dress up in a gown, wear a wig in the hot tropics. And I just picking this as an example, completely irrelevant. We got rid of the wigs. But remember the time when Burnham got rid of the wigs when we became a republic? It was a big story. Oh, God, how are you getting rid of the wigs? There are countries like Kenya still wearing wigs. Tell me, what is the relevance of a horsehair wig standing up in court? It doesn't affect your advocacy. Quite frankly, I would lose the gun. Keep the dress sober. But what are you trying to tell you? Law is not some mystique. It is there for the development of people and the protection of their rights and advancing their causes. Let's get rid of this mystique and deal with what's the real issue. But coming back to the point with education, we have a female chancellor and we have a female chief justice. There was a time they didn't even allow women to qualify as lawyers. There was a big battle. While I was practicing, women could wear trousers to court. Mm-hmm. I remember Indira Prasad carrying that battle. So we have to understand what's the purpose and function of these so-called professions. It's about development. It's not about keeping class and structure mystic. So yes, education is critical from where I sit.
Yes, I have a couple of people to thank. I want to thank um, Sholing. I want to thank Agri. Novella, thank you so much. Agri, thank you so much. Samuel, thank you so much. C-Thread, thank you very much. Pamela, thank you very much. And Cousin Donna, yes, this is my Arizona cousins, them. Cousin Donna, I know you're always working hard, but I'm looking out for your call to make your contribution. I thank you in advance, Donna from Buxton and Linden, Arizona, always working hard. Donna is here for a long time. I work in 2 shifts a day. And I'm amazed and still find time to come in on these programs. I really think when the history of this period is written, I mean, you all, I mean, is signaling me that times you're going late tonight. But I'm going late is only because you all are going away. I thank you all so much, and I know some of you all joining us from Europe. It's 4 hours now. It's what almost 9 o'clock. It's 1 o'clock in the morning, and when you all done it, you all going to sleep. You all got catch Sherrod. You all got catch Mark, and so on. Big up to you all, Nigel. We've been at it for almost 2 hours, and I'm very glad that you were able to come through and to clarify a lot for us here tonight, but also to bring insight to some of the issues we have been discussing tonight. In case there's anything I didn't ask you about, I have to be careful. Maybe there's some things, politicians, we always have something that we really want to say. And in the old days, they didn't matter what you ask them, they say what they want to say. But you're all a little bit sophisticated now. You all don't do that. You get during the wrap up time to give your stump. Your closing thoughts, Nigel.
David, I just want to thank you again for.
Nigel, before you go, before you go, this one, somebody asked it and they tell me Dr. Enzo going to beat you up if you don't ask Nigel this question. You give Aubrey a call or you get a call from Aubrey since you all been elected?
Yeah, we've spoken. What I will say is the comments you attributed to Aubrey, well, not to Aubrey, that your viewers attributed to him. If you notice yesterday, there were very, very favorable comments coming out of Mr. Norton about the approach to coalition, about my leadership of the Alliance for Change. And I thank him for his graciousness. I want to say, and Aubrey has said this, I'm only repeating what he said. We enjoy at a personal level an excellent relationship. I don't believe that we will be drawn into some sort of battle and the nastiness that you see happening elsewhere in the in the political sphere. We are keenly aware of the significance and the responsibility placed on our shoulders individually and jointly. And I believe we will bring to bear a maturity in the deliberations, not for our personal benefit, but for the benefit of the people who have trusted us to represent them. So yes, we've been in contact. I know you're gonna want to ask me what we spoke about.
No. I won't ask you that.
I can't do that. I ain't going there. But I will say that we have been in contact. So people who have hesitations or concerns about whether we ain't talking or we at war, I think we in there. And I say that across the board for all political persons. I will not get into some nasty little name calling. That to me doesn't help Guyana. And if it doesn't help Guyana, it's not worth saying.
And if I can say, you have been in contact with the WPA.
Absolutely.
Also. Right. So
absolutely. I will actually go as far as to say this. Clive Thomas, to me, is a national treasure. And I would be reckless not to consult with Professor Thomas, especially in economic matters. Of course, on direct transfers, that's his area. But you can't hope to talk about the planning an economy like we say for 10 to 15 years and not consult. So yes.
Yes. And so let not your heart be troubled. Nigel has been in contact with the WPA, in contact with Brother Aubrey. Aubrey has been in contact with us in the WPA, with me. And so yes, we're not fighting down at the top, if you will. And so let not your hearts be troubled. We're gonna do this thing and we're gonna see it through, one step at a time, one day at a time. Nigel, you still have your closing thoughts.
No, no, I was just going to say thank you for, I think, thank you for inviting me. I think this has been a most fruitful discussion from my perspective. You've afforded me an opportunity to share some of my views and vision for Guyana. Um, that is invaluable to me. I want to say to every citizen, we have to sit down and be responsible. We cannot act like a kid in a candy shop and try to eat all the candy because we can end up with diabetes and we can dead. So thank everybody. Education is absolutely critical. I think it is the ultimate opportunity to level the imbalances of the past. So David, thank you, and to your listeners, thank you very much.
And thank you very much. As of course, our program tonight was titled "Better Must Come," and drawn from the reggae music of the 1970s, early 1970s, with the coming to power of Michael Manley and the reggae
People's
singers.
National Party, my friend.
Yes, yes,
Allow
yes.
me to let me, David. I know that you like to read. This book
Yeah.
is about the People's National Party at 75. It's actually called the People's National Party at 75, the Party for the People.
Yes, I have.
Um,
Yeah.
and you know, one of the people. Anyway, don't let me
No, no,
disclose.
go right ahead.
No, no, no. I was going to say, to me, one of the not sufficiently recognized leaders of the Caribbean, who was a prime minister of Jamaica, is P.J. Patterson,
Yes,
and
yes,
he really is an exceptional politician. And in terms of development, he's second to none in the region.
yes, yes, yes. And if truth be told, PJ Patterson was the first phenotypically
Yep,
black prime minister of Jamaica.
yep.
He came. Nigel, thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming through, my brother.
Thank you.
Nigel Hughes here, and please do make your contribution to our fund. There may be a couple of people who made contributions that I haven't thanked yet. Please make your contribution. The information is on there. The Cash App, the PayPal, the Zelle, and of course the MMG is there, 6631549. Thank you all very much for staying beyond the call of duty. We've gone for 2 hours, but when you get an opportunity to talk to somebody like Nigel Hughes, you stay with it, and you all stayed with us. I'm going to see you all tomorrow night. We may start a little bit early at 6:30 tomorrow night, but I'll let you know early enough. But I'll see you all tomorrow night when we come back with another edition of Politics 101. Love you all, love you all, love you all. Big love.